Hey, I'm Scott.
And I'm Chris.
And this is Doxalogic, where we help you think with your Bible.
Welcome back for another Mailbag episode on Doxalogic. Scott and Chris, it's good, as always, to be here with you again.
A joy, Bree.
Every time we get to do this, I'm thankful. And I'm thankful, as all people are, that you're on this episode.
Yeah.
You move us along so well. You balance us out so well. We're so glad you're here.
Thanks
And
for
Chris, you look like a superhero today.
Is
Because
that
I can
right?
see you through
Oh,
half
like
of
he's
your
wearing a
microphone
mask.
stand.
I got my mask.
You got your mask on.
You're going to have to see it, folks, but
It's kind of,
it's okay.
yeah.
It's okay. I'm working
It's one of
with
the
it.
greatest compliments I've given you.
That's so funny. You should keep
It's one of
that.
the only compliments you've given me.
Hey!
Boom, roasted.
Hey.
Got him. Take every opportunity
man.
I get, folks.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys, we have some questions before us. Let's jump right in. The first one reads like this. Is it okay for ChatGPT to write sermons? What is a helpful way to think about the future of AI?
No.
Good two-part question. First one's a lot easier to answer. No. I mean, it's...
You can use it as a resource, but you have to be careful. Like, first of all, ChatGPT, do we want to give any background to that?
Sure, just
It's
a briefly.
briefly,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just all the rage in kind of a new form of artificial intelligence where you can basically say, hey, I'd like a 3-point outline of James 5, 10 to 13. I mean, you can use it for a lot of things.
In the voice of insert famous pastor.
Yeah.
Like the voice of John Piper, the
Yeah.
voice of Tim Keller, the
Yeah.
voice of R.C. Sproul. Like if
Wow.
it's a well-known person, literally it will, or from a reform perspective.
There you go.
Versus from another perspective.
Yep.
You literally can get
and
different
it will
messages.
give it that flavor.
And what's dangerous, among other things, is that it's going to give you a unique sermon. It's not plagiarism in the sense of you literally took someone's transcript. It's actually giving you a new sermon to preach.
Wow.
So that's what's...
That's why the question probably came up.
You can't use the word plagiarism, but you can use a lot of other words, which is that you're lying.
Sure,
that
and it's not your sermon. It's not
probably
your sermon. It may
acting
not
like
be
you
someone
did
else's.
but acting like you did the work.
Sure,
And so
yeah,
my
that's true
first
too.
concern not only is that whatever it brings, even if it's pretty solid based on the the outputs it gives you is based on the inputs you give it, but it's that the pastor is that the church is losing because the pastor is losing the soul forming nature of a
Yeah.
umpteen hours of preparing for a sermon to bring it to the people.
Yeah.
And if you're acting like you did that work and then getting in the pulpit with 30 to 60 minutes of just like, let's polish this thing and let her rip, I think it's a I would say shame on you is what I would say to the pastor who does that, because
Yeah.
that's you're robbing your own soul and then your flock in using something like
Yeah.
that.
I was going to say that's a big forfeit on someone who would
Regardless
use, yeah.
of how accurate it might be.
Huge, because
Yeah.
preaching, so many people think preaching is just preparing content on a page, but from doing preaching for a long time, God's is committed to preparing the preacher to preach the message
Right.
as he is committed to enabling the preacher to do the work to create the message.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the preaching and the preacher in mind in any context, and you strip that whole preacher preparation side away in terms of how God breaks you over the text, how God applies it to you before you ever get to applying it to others. And you miss all of that. So it becomes, at best, an artificial on a lot of different levels, not to mention everything you said, Chris, but also artificial to your own heart. You haven't done the work to really wrestle that text out faithfully from the text, wrestle that sermon out.
Yeah. So you're not walking your talk at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's an element of like, yes to using tools
Yes,
in the process
it can be a tool.
to helping you. Well, here's the thing. Yes to using tools. So Logos or Logos, depending on how people pronounce it. There's other softwares,
Bible Works,
and all this.
Blue Letter
and
Bible
let
for people
alone
that are
like print commentaries,
online.
obviously. So those are softwares. There's commentaries and consult. And you might have a pastor or theologian you really respect, and you want to find what has he said about this in the past after and as you're doing the work in the text yourself to get it in you so that you're getting it ready. So it's not that you can't use any tools to help, but I would say is in its current version, ChatGPT going to be the kind of tool that you could appropriate, not in this way, which is write me the sermon. So I'm left wondering what if anything is the valid way to use something like ChatGPT or using it. AI tool. Let's just say
Yeah.
that, because there's so many of them now. People who are paying attention are saying you're already late to the party if you're still
Right.
talking about GPT, because there's
moves.
all these other AI tools out there. So that's my concern there. I don't know how this is going to shake up the landscape, other than there's no doubt. Unlike historically, the way pastors do get busted for plagiarism, and rightly so, pastors won't be getting busted for plagiarism in this instance, but they'll be getting busted first and foremost under the watchful eye of God for not doing their work honestly.
Yeah.
And then they will be busted in some sense of they won't have the depth that God gives to the pastor for future ministry. Not everything in the sermon prep makes it into the sermon, but you'd be surprised at what you can use later because God got it into you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just say too, we're working on this for a Doxalogic episode coming up.
AI in general.
AI
yeah.
in
Sneak
general,
peek, yeah.
and Greg Lanier, who's kind of a major voice. He's a professor at Reformed Theological Seminary. I think either wrote an extensive paper for a theological society, or I think that's what it was. Has agreed to come onto our podcast. So speaking of technology developing, we'll see where we are. He's
that's
going to
in
come on in
September,
September. But looking forward to that, and we'll have more of this conversation to come. So stay tuned. Good question.
Very cool.
You've been listening to Doxalogic, a podcast by Doxa Church in Rockland, California. To learn more, visit us online at doxa.church.